Hi to everyone who's just joining from the waiting room. We are about 2 minutes out from 10 o'clock, which is our start time on my side of the world, at least. So we'll give it maybe just a couple minutes here and then we will get started. All right. Got a couple more people coming in here. We're just going to wait right till the turn of the hour here. All right. Let's kick off here. So hi, welcome to our next webinar. As you can see, our topic today is sustaining problem-solving gains using LPAs to prevent regression. We'll be discussing linking CQI-8 to CQI-20. Just gonna start off by welcoming our guest speaker today.
Hello, everyone.
If
Good
you want to
morning.
jump to our next slide.
Yeah. Aha.
Perfect. All right. Hi, everybody. This is Alan Lambert. He's got 25 years in the automotive industry. He's an IATF trainer and a content creator. He's got an MBA with a focus on quality management from Auburn, Six Sigma Green Belt, lead auditor in quality, environmental safety, and a business consultant. So we're very happy to have him here speaking to you all today.
Okay. Good to have everyone today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Today, we're going to be talking about how we can link CQI-8 and CQI-20 to get benefit. So we're going to do just a quick overview of CQI-8 and CQI-20, what they are. We're going to talk about, why the layer process audit process can be so painful if it was not implemented properly, and how we can make it add value. We're also going to be talking about where CQI-8 and CQI-20 fit into the quality management system and how to drive better layer process audits through the use of CQI-20 and the corrective action process. We're also going to talk about the movies a little bit. We're going to talk about lessons learned from Shawshank Redemption and how we can use CQI-8 to help institutionalize corrective actions. And then we're going to talk about the importance of continuous improvement and how these tools can help us with that. Okay.
All right, great. We're gonna start us off with a poll here, just a really quick get to know who's in the audience with us today. So you should see that launched on your screen now. If I could just get everybody to take a look, it's 3 pretty short questions, just so we know what kind of people we are catering to here today. And I just want to remind everybody that we do have a Q&A feature down at the bottom of your screen. So if you do have any questions at any time, you can feel free to submit those. I'll be monitoring those and we'll hopefully have some time for a quick Q&A at the end here. So let's get I see I've got some answers coming in here now. If I can just get a couple more of you to get us. All right. Let's see here. I think some of you are still just filtering in right now. All right, great. I'm gonna end this poll and share our results here. So as you can see, it's first question is, what is your current role in your organization? It looks like we got a good breakdown here. So we've got about 50% running the company's audit programs and about 27 to 30% completing the audits. And we got some others. When it comes to problem solving, what role do you typically play within your company? It's a almost completely even split between participating and leading. And then another almost completely even split between what you consider to be the most important factor in getting sustainable results. So that's great that we've got a really good mix of people here. So with that, I am going to leave the floor to Alan, and I will see you guys again in a little bit.
Okay, thanks, Maddie. All right, so it looks like a lot of you are running your audits program, your company's audit program, or at least participate. So we'll focus on that. We're going to talk a little bit about what they are, the tools are. So, LPAs are, a management tool that we can use to help verify that work instructions, controls, procedures, things that we need to monitor are in place and are being followed, right? So that we're following those requirements and those standards. If we do that well, we'll see benefits. Such it drives ownership in the process. It leads to process control and continuous improvement. Most people don't come to work every day to do a bad job. They want to do a good job. Where we run into problem is where we don't have good work instructions, or we didn't do good training, or we don't have good process controls in place, or people are not following those work instructions. To be honest, we have work instructions on the shop floor. They're there for the operators, but once they know their job, they don't always refer back to them, right? So it's really easy when we have changes in our system that people revert back to their memory and revert back to the old ways. So layer process audits can be a good way to help us prevent that, adding questions in regards to those changes to help people not revert back to the old ways. When we're not following our work instructions or don't have good controls in place, that can lead to issues like scrap and rework or customer complaints, warranty and recalls. So a lot of those negative problems occur. We can prevent those kind of things with a good layer process audit system. Now, in our layer process audits, they're conducted by all levels of management. Right? So from the plant manager down to the supervisor or team leader. And we can also have these audits completed when we have visitors, corporate top people come into our facilities. We can, ask them to do a layer process audit as well. That shows, leadership involvement. It leads to, process improvements and better employee engagement and strengthens trust between the operators and management. However, our audit systems, whether it be layer process audits or internal audits, they do not need to become punitive. If we start using it as a discipline tool, then we'll lose all the engagement and all the opportunities for improvement. When we're doing audits, layer process audits, it's a time to air our dirty laundry. When we're having the discussions with the operators, we want them to be open and tell us where they're having problems and what needs to be corrected and where they see continuous improvement activities. And if the audit process become punitive, then they will be willing and open to talk to us, right? So we got to weed out the people that cause issues, but the layer process audit or internal audit process is not the tool to do that. Layer process audits are verifications or audits to ensure that activities are being followed and they're in place and being followed as they should be. So it's not an inspection. It's not a control. It's a verification that inspection or control is being performed. Therefore, layer process audits don't belong on a control plan. Okay. So CQI-20, it is the automotive approach to problem solving, and it is a proven method for addressing problems. It's not used for those quick fixes, things that we know the root cause for, like layer process audits. When we have an issue, we correct it immediately if we can. The CQI-20 corrective action process is not for those kind of things. It's for those systemic issues, things we don't know the root cause of, and it's a good problem-solving tool that uses a multidisciplinary team to help determine root causes and eliminate those root causes, and to prevent them from happening again. It talks about having to or how we should cascade corrective actions from one problem into similar processes or problems, right? So we can gain preventive actions as well. Yeah. Now, let's talk about why the LPA process can be so painful. Whether, this can help you think about what, if you're starting an LPA process, maybe things to avoid and things to put in place up front. If you already have an LPA process and you're struggling, hopefully this will help you with, some things you can do. Okay. So, there are many reasons why we don't get value out of our layer process audit processes, our layer process audits, and sometimes it can be perceived as a waste of time or painful, right? So across the top here in these red sections, you can see some things that may cause us to have problems. And so when we have generic or vague questions or use the same questions for every process, it's going to lead to ineffective audits and real issues or continuous opportunities for improvement are going to be missed, not even going to be identified. So to combat that, we need to make sure that the questions that we ask and questions that we include in our layer process audit are important, that they are process specific, that they are linked to customer issues or customer concerns, things that are going to affect the customer, to our KPIs that we want to monitor and control. So, we need to make sure that we focus on the right things in our layer process audit to ensure that we keep those questions beneficial and where it drives improvement. When you think about pencil whipping, when auditors just go through the motion and do audits, they wait till the last minute and try to do them. Maybe they even do them from their desk. There's no value in that. Right? We're not going to find any issues. We're not going to correct anything. It's just becomes a waste of time. So we really need management involvement, and we'll see that throughout this presentation, where management involvement is and their leadership is important to make sure that the process works. What's important to management is important to everyone. So, we need to make sure that we keep the questions fresh. They don't become stagnant. When questions are always yes, 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 there's not an issue anymore, take that away, add something else. So we make sure that we have good questions. And also, we need to make sure we have good metrics for the KPI process. Every process has to have metrics. We find that in IATF 441. Layer process audits is a process, and we need good metrics for that. So, sometimes we have, a metrics for, do we complete the audits to schedule? Well, we need that. It helps to ensure accountability and cover it, but we also need other things like the number of findings per audit. If we have too few, it may indicate that we just got the pencil whipping situation going on. If we have too many, then that indicates we may have poor process control or a lack of effective corrective actions. Action item closure rate is another KPI. So if items are not addressed immediately, we need to make sure that we have action plans put in place where we have somebody's responsible and a due date. So I used to work for a man that said we always need a name and a frame, right? So we need a time frame and we need to have responsibility. So who's responsible, what's the name, and what's the due date, what's the frame, right? So a good metric or KPI could be, how many repeat audit findings do we have? So high repeat rates indicates weak corrective actions or poor performance. With LPAs, we do those quick fixes, right? And sometimes those quick fixes, solves it temporarily, but it comes back. So when we're looking at repeat audit findings, we can use Pareto charts and determine, what our top issues are that are causing problems. And then we can use the corrective action process to address those issues, right? And so use CQI-20 to address the CQI-8 findings that are repeat, And we can't do that for everything, right? Because it would be corrective actions time consuming, but at least we can hit those high Pareto items that keep coming back and causing us problems. Right? Another KPI might be how the LPA process affects other metrics, right? So we can measure the improvement to scrap or improvement to customer complaints or rework. Then we can see how effective that the LPA process is. And communicating that to everyone helps show the benefit of why we have LPAs. You know, when KPIs for LPAs are not valid, you know, not reviewed by management, no feedback provided to the team, then audits are not taken seriously and the findings are not acted on or not found in the first place, right? So we got to make sure that we have feedback so we know how the process is working. And that feedback should come from management, how that when they're reviewing these KPIs for the process, they're reviewing the metrics regularly, holding people accountable, and we can see the benefit on the shop floor and at the auditor level. Right? You know, lack of leadership involvement. You know, this is very similar to, you know, things I've already talked about. What's important to management is important to everyone. So, you know, leadership should review the LPA KPIs. You know, they can have, we normally have daily Gemba walks, or we have daily meetings in a war room. We're looking at all the KPIs. We have the staff together. We're standing up talking about the KPIs. Layered process audit KPIs are important as well. And we do that, shows leadership involvement. It's important leadership. Then it'll be taken seriously by everyone else. Okay. Some other issues like time constraints. You know, there's only so much time in a day. So layered process audits should be part of our standard work. It needs to be planned. We need to have time for it. When we don't give it time for those process audits, they will be rushed, and issues will be missed. So, you know, we need to limit the amount of questions that we have in an LPA every day. You know, 3 to 5 questions, no more than 10. So it's pretty quick. We hit the main key points. If we have a lot of questions for a process, maybe, you know, they rotate every day. Then, you know, in 7.2 of the IATF standard, it talks about competency. So if our auditors are not trained or they don't understand what LPA is for, you know, they get frustrated when they do the audits. We'll get poor or inconsistent findings. So training and explaining the tool to them is important. Making sure they understand what it's for, making sure we provide coaching so they understand. We provide training on the process and how we're going to do it, so they can do a good job. And then we start seeing better KPIs, and we provide them feedback and coaching, and it gives them more confidence, and they can do a better job at auditing. So inadequate training can cause problems. It can cause us pain. You know, the lack of data analysis. You know, so when we don't analyze all the data we collect from the LPA process, then we don't see those recurring issues that happen over and over and over. We put quick fixes in place and it doesn't solve anything, it comes back. So, you know, we need to use Pareto charts and look for those repeat issues, and then take actions on those systemic issues, right, that need a formal corrective action. And that last one, questions remain static. You know, if we never change our questions and allow them to stagnate, and the questions lose relevance, and the improvement we've seen stalls, which is something that happens very regularly. We start an LPA process, we come up with the questions, and they never change, right? So we have to keep the questions fresh. anytime we have a change, we ECN or continuous improvement, change from continuous improvement, or if we have corrective actions from customer complaints that drive the change, we need to make sure that we update the questions, right? To not only to keep them fresh, but to make sure they're relevant on problems that we're having today, right? And we can use the LPA process to add those questions to make sure that we reinforce the importance of the change and it becomes part of the culture, becomes institutionalized. Okay. A few other pain points that we might run into. All right. So if the team members see no value in LPAs, right? When the LPA process is not monitored by management, like I said, if it's not important to management, it's not important to anyone. So they see no value in it. It's a waste of time. It leads to pencil whipping. We're just checking a box. So everyone needs to understand why we're doing LPAs, why it's important. We need to track meaningful KPIs. We need to post them. We need to talk about them. We need to celebrate success. At all levels, the people doing the audits and the people being audited, everyone needs to understand the benefit of it. So why is it important? We have CSRs. I'll talk about them a little bit later. That talks about we need to audit every department or every process. But we over audit those low risk areas and don't focus our time on the ones that have more relevance or have more issues that are critical, right? Criticality of the process, the ones that have an impact on the customer. We need to be focused on those things. We can prioritize. We don't want to waste our time and resources auditing things that's not as critical, not as important. So we need to use the risk-based approach to prioritize our audits and make sure we're auditing the things that has the most value. All right. And then we'll talk about the last issue, no link to CQI-20 here or the core tools. We'll talk about that a lot more later on in this webinar. But if we only do quick fixes and do not track our systemic issues, we will struggle with those repeat findings, right? So we missed the opportunity to document lessons learned. We need to update our EMAS control plans or standard work, and using CQI-20, the problem-solving tool, to help enforce layered process audits is a great way to get these improvements. The next topic, where does CQI-8 and CQI-20 fit into the quality management system? So, LPAs and CQI-8 is mentioned twice in the IATF standard. And I don't think it actually says CQI-8. I think it just says layered process audits. In 85611, talking about temporary change of process controls. If we have a inspection method or a gauging method, that fails to work, we have to, or damaged, we have to replace it using an alternate gauge or alternate tool. The IATF standard says that we have to verify that alternate tool is working every day until we get the primary back in place. And it mentions there in that text of the standard that LPA is a viable way to do that. It talks about gimbal walks and management going and seeing it every day is another way to do it. It also mentions, in Annex B, it mentioned in the supplementary automotive bibliography, it talks about all the CQIs and CQI-8 and CQI-20 is one of those mentioned there. But it's not required in the IATF standard. However, it can be required according to your CSRs, your customer-specific requirements. So GM has a customer-specific requirement that says that we will do layered process audits. It says customer complaints should trigger layered process audits, and it says that we need specific questions should be asked. LPAs are required for all departments within the organization, and not just manufacturing. Right? In their CSR, it says we have to keep questions updated and relevant, and it said that they should be used to verify corrective actions. Right? Stellantis says that they require regular review by top management and conducted on all shifts. So LPA may not be a requirement according to the IATF standard, but it could be a requirement for our customers. And if it's not a requirement and we want to use it, it's a great tool. We just need to implement it correctly and use it correctly. CQI-20, it's only mentioned in the bibliography, but we do have in section 10 of the IATF standard, it says we have to do corrective action and problem solving. And this CQI-20 is the automotive approach for problem solving. Now you may have a customer specific that says you have to use some certain tool. If you do, then you need to use that. Right? But if not, CQI-20 is a good way. It's been endorsed by many companies. They signed the first edition that says, hey, we endorse this. So it's a good tool. And even if it's not a hard requirement, it is a best practice for problem solving, right? And when we have that in 10.2 and 10.3 of the standard, where it requires that we do problem solving, it doesn't tell us exactly what tool to use. Now, how do we drive better LPA performance with corrective actions? Now, I've already mentioned this, but LPAs have a larger impact when corrective action process is used to address repeat issues. So, we need to fix the things that we can as we do LPAs. When we can't, we come up with action items with a, like I said, with a name and a frame. But we need to use, KPIs such as repeat issues. We Pareto those things so we can see what is causing us the most problem, the most pain. And then we can use the CQI-20 process to determine the root cause of those repeat issues and put in corrective actions that will stop it and make it go away. Right? We don't want those things to keep coming back. And this leads to improvements in KPIs, cost savings. People start seeing the benefit, start seeing the more value for the LPA process. Okay. Now, I'll talk to you about the Shawshank Redemption. The Shawshank Redemption is a great movie, and it's one of my favorites. If you haven't seen it, hopefully I can still make this make you understand my points here. But CQI-20 is a 9-step approach to problem solving. And step 8 discusses institutionalizing corrective actions. So in step 8, it says we need to take the actions that we put in place for whatever our problem was, and can we implement those in other processes, other part numbers, so we can cascade or do read across for our corrective actions. And by doing that, those things become preventive actions for those other processes or part numbers that wasn't part of the issue. It also mentions in step 8 that the CQI-8 tool can help you institutionalize your corrective actions. And, when we have a corrective action, we can take questions and add to the layered process audit questions, take away the ones that doesn't have value anymore, the things that we've already got in place that's working good, replace them with these changes or the corrective actions that we have in place. And we do that every day, every shift, every day, until we know that corrective action is implemented, it's being followed, and it's part of our process now. It becomes institutionalized. Right? And then, in the introduction of CQI-8 in the manual for layered process audits, it notes that employees often revert back to their old habits, right? we can prevent this by adding these things to all the changes to the layer process audit. And we do it every day until we know that they've got it, right? So we update our standard work, we update control plans, we update FEMAs, we make sure they're implemented properly, we make sure people are following them. We can do that with layer process audits. So, it says while reoccurrence happens here, sometimes, we just fail to completely institutionalize our corrective actions. We don't update all the documents. We don't add those questions to the layer process audits to make sure that we institutionalize them. We don't do a good job of communicating changes every time. Sometimes the change can be like, what was it? Christmas Vacation. Chevy Chase thought he was going to get a big bonus, and he winds up getting the Jelly of the Month Club. We don't want our corrective actions or our changes to become the jelly of the month or the flavor of the month. We want to make sure that they become culture. They become part of how we do things. We change how we do things, right? We need to institutionalize those corrective actions. So in the movie, Shawshank Redemption, all right? This has got Morgan Freeman. He plays the part of Red. And then Tim Robbins is Andy Dufresne. There's another character in the movie named Brooks. I can't remember Brooks' last name, but he's a guy that's been in prison for 50 years. And he finds out he's getting paroled, and he's scared to death. He's been in prison so long that that's all he knows. He's institutionalized, right? So when he finds out that he's going to get released in the movie, the book and the movie is a little bit different, but I'm going to talk about the book. I mean, the movie. I'm talking about the movie. So he finds out he's going to get released. He grabs one of his buddies, puts a knife to his throat, and he's thinking seriously about killing him just so he can stay in prison. And Red or Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins, they talk him down, and he doesn't hurt his friend. The next scene in the movie goes to the yard. Brooks gets out of prison. All of his friends are sitting in the bleachers in the prison yard. And the guy that had the knife put to his neck said, "That old man's crazy. He was going to kill me." And Morgan Freeman says, "Hey, he's been here 50 years. He's institutionalized. This is all he knows. He's scared." He said, "Let's see how you are after you've been here 50 years." So the scene goes outside the prison, and Brooks is working in a halfway house, or living in a halfway house, working in a grocery store. And he realizes that I just can't handle this. I can't do it. He's scared. Everything's gotten a big hurry, he says. And, so he goes back to his room and he hangs himself. He commits suicide by hanging himself. So he was institutionalized to the point where he couldn't take change at all. So it's very important that when we have corrective actions, or we have changes, we can use the LPA process to make sure that those changes become institutionalized. They become the way we do things. And we add it to our list and we check it every day until it's institutionalized. Then we can drop it off and add something else. But another key point from this movie is, when we have a change and we put it in place, it becomes part of our process. We can't be afraid to look for other continuous improvement opportunities. We've made a change, but later on we find a better way to do it. So we got to be open and be flexible to seek new opportunities. Okay. So Brooks, he wasn't able to, and he committed suicide. We don't need to be that stringent, and just die with what we have in place. We need to be looking for those opportunities for improvement. Use the LPAs to institutionalize corrective actions, and then make sure we're still open using the layer process audit to find better ways to do things. Okay. And, from this movie, using the LPA tool as a way to institutionalize corrective action. So we have talked about this a couple of times already, but I want to reinforce this topic. Our layer process audit questions should not remain static. They need to be kept fresh. They need to be updated. Okay. when process steps and controls are institutionalized and are always being followed, then we can remove those questions and replace them with something more relevant. So we talked about how when we have repeat issues with layer process audits, we can use the corrective action process to hit those repeat issues, do root cause analysis, do a deeper dive and put in a corrective action to make them go away. Now here, we're using the LPA process to help institutionalize corrective actions. So, ineffective change management can lead to serious issues. Many times, we change something, or anytime we change something, like I said, whether it be ECN, or we're implementing a change from a corrective action, or we're implementing something to do with a continuous improvement project. It doesn't matter what it is. The LPA process can be a tool that help us to institutionalize that change, to make sure that we've got it documented properly, and to make sure people are following those updated requirements, following the process, following the controls. It becomes part of our process. And once we do that, then we can change the question and go to something else. Okay. Now, the last topic I'm going to cover is the importance of ongoing continuous improvement and how CQI-8 and CQI-20 can help with that. Right. So corrective actions, addresses root cause of problems. However, when we do that read across, and like I mentioned in step 8 of the CQI-20 process, it says we need to look at similar products, similar processes to see where we can implement those actions. Those can become preventive actions or continuous improvement actions, however you want to call them. The CQI-8 manual talks about continuous improvement 12 times in the standard, and it's 6 times in CQI-20. And then IATF has requirements around it in 10.3 and 10.3.1, so we have to do it. So, if we're doing LPAs, it's fairly common that we might find an operator on first shift doing something different than the guys on second shift, doing something different from the guys on third shift, right? So even though we have standard work, maybe people are not following it, doing it differently. So, we need to find, which method is correct, which method is giving us the best benefit, the lowest cycle time, whatever. And if it matches our standard work, we need to reinforce that standard work on all the shifts, make sure people are doing it the same way. If it's different from our standard work, we need to change standard work, to go with that best practice that we found. So operators comes up with ingenious ways to do things, and we need to be open and willing to change our standard work if they have a better way. And then corrective actions, the insights that stand beyond one process. I talked about making sure we cascade it, right? So we can get a lot of benefit using these tools, right? So LPAs, having open dialogue with our employees, they come up with good suggestions. One important thing is when we do have those continuous improvement suggestions that we have during a layer process audit, or if we're just walking across the floor and an operator says, "Hey, I got a thought," and they tell you an idea, and we're all busy. Maybe we get stopped 3 more times before we get to our desk, and we forgot, right? We forgot that suggestion, and we don't react to it. We're going to lose engagement of that employee. So it's very important that, if we find continuous improvements in a layer process audit, or we find continuous improvements just because somebody brought it to our attention, whether we do it or not, or implement it or not, we need to make sure we provide feedback to those people, letting them know when it's going to be done or why it can't be done or whatever. They just need feedback so they know that their input is valuable, and that helps them stay engaged in the process. Okay. All right, Maddie, I think I'm ready for the last poll.
Perfect. All right. This is just a really quick poll for you guys. It's just one question, so hopefully it's not too overwhelming for you. The question is, what do you think the biggest challenge will be in linking your LPAs to be both the initiator in problem solving as well as the validator of the action taken? So we got our options here are cultural shift, resource restraints, and the lack of interconnected process. So we'll just give you guys a couple more seconds here to answer. And also, while you guys are answering this poll, just wanted to remind you that we still have that Q&A feature. We've got Q&As coming up here in just a minute. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put those in now. Obviously, if you don't have any questions, that's great too. It means that everything was covered perfectly. But we're gonna have time here for some questions in just a second. All right, looks like we've got a decent amount of answers in this poll here. So I'm just gonna share our results. And it looks like we've got a good mix of answers here, kind of a decent split between cultural shift and resource restraints, and then a little bit here with the lack of interconnected process. So that's really good information to know. And thank you guys for sharing that. So let's jump to the
So before we take a question, that resource constraints, right? And I'll talk about this real quick. So I talked to, one of the main pain points could be that time constraints or scheduling conflicts. And how do we address that? Making sure that it is part of our standard work. So it's scheduled in our day. It is important to management. And we plan for it. And that will help us to ensure that, I know where every company goes through these time periods where they reduce headcount and we have lack of resource, try to do more with less. But layer process audits can drive great improvements if we do it properly. And so making sure that we schedule time for that can seriously help. And we were almost equal with the cultural shift. And I mentioned it many, many times. I sound almost like a broken record, but leadership involvement, what's important to them is important to everyone else. That starts changing the culture. When they get involved, they start setting KPIs, realistic KPIs for the LPA process, and start measuring how the LPA process is improving other metrics. Then the culture starts to change and we can see some good benefit. Okay. I'm ready for the questions.
Perfect. All right, we'll jump back there. Got a couple filtering in here. So first one we've got here is what is the best average number of questions for an effective LPA?
Okay. So this is my opinion. It doesn't say exactly how many we need, but somewhere around 5, I think, is a good number. Anywhere from 3 to 7 is good. I like 5 questions. And maybe we have a big list of 20 questions to choose from that we need to ask, but we can, rotate those questions or, randomize the questions and go with, about 5, because we do have those time constraints, right? Let's not forget that we have time constraints, so we don't need to go out and ask 20 questions and take an hour to an LPA. That's not what we're trying to do. Okay.
Great. Okay. Next one we have here is in the event of updating the questions in the LPA or CQI-8, what recommendations should be made?
Okay. So I mentioned that, questions does not need to become stagnant or static. So when we have questions that we've identified and it's always yes, 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 there's never a problem, drop that question off. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be customer complaints. We have customer complaint, we do a corrective action. We want to make sure that corrective action becomes institutionalized. We add a question about that onto our layer process audits. We have scrap concerns, rework. Maybe there's even a supplier issue that we may need to verify in our layer process audits. So, or an ECN change. There's a lot of things going on in our facilities, new equipment, new operators that we can key our questions to make sure that we're following our work instructions procedures properly.
Great, thank you. Here's a more specific one. It says, what do you recommend in a company with a strong LPA program that works to the point of the audits are being done, the issues are being seen and closed, but then nothing happens? We've got the same findings that are being repetitive and cannot get out of the cycle.
Okay, so you've got a good LPA process, you're finding things, but you keep having repeat findings. And that is where the integration of CQI-20 comes in. So those repeat findings, you need to determine, using some kind of data review, maybe creating a Pareto, what's my biggest issue, and do a serious problem-solving effort, a corrective action using CQI-20, or if you're not using CQI-20, use your problem-solving you have already in your facility, and determine the real root cause, not just those quick fixes that we do for LPA, but summarize that data, determine the biggest issues, get a team together, do a full-blown corrective action, and try to make it go away.
All right, let's see. Any tips on the frequency of LPA audits?
Okay, yeah, so they're in the CQI-8, it gives you the standard guidelines in there. In customer specifics, it tells you that you need to do them every shift. So when you get the lower level team leaders, supervisors, they're probably doing them every day, right? Every day on every shift. And then you have your process owners or your managers, engineers can be involved, or your salary staff, maybe they're doing them once a week. You get your managers, your plant manager, they're doing them once a month. You can even have another level where you have those visitors I talked about, where they do one LPA when they come to your facility to show that we have support from outside of our plant. So you got to make sure you consult your customer specific requirements to make sure you meet those. However, so daily for some levels, weekly for some levels, monthly for some levels, but make sure that you follow your customer specific requirements.
Great. All right, let's take just a couple more. We've got, who should primarily carry out the LPA? Should top management also be a part of it?
100%. Top management should be part of it. I think maybe it's GM that says that, the top management has to be involved. And the CQI-8 manual suggests that they are involved. So the highest level in your plant, being maybe your plant manager, it could be the operations director or whatever it is, they should be doing those. So from team leaders, supervisors, managers, or even before managers, maybe you include in that supervisor level all of your salary employees getting out and doing these audits. So you get new eyes, gives you new findings, right? So keep rotating people as well, because you want to get fresh perspectives. But for sure, you need the top management involved in this process, doing these audits. They don't do it as frequently because they're busy. Everyone's busy. But they should do it at some frequency, no more than or no less than once a month. And they may need to do it more frequently based on your customer specifics. Okay.
Great. And let's grab one more. We've got, how long should an LPA take someone to perform?
Okay. Yeah. Probably no longer than 10 minutes, right? You limit those questions. It doesn't need to be really time consuming, but it may need to be a little bit longer based on risk or criticality of the process. But it's not a long-term event that happens. It's a short thing that happens every day. So, if you can do it 5 to 15 minutes, 10 minutes being the target would be a good time. It don't need
Great.
to be too painful. We need to keep that pain out of it for everybody that's busy. Okay.
All right. Let's I got some final notes for all of you guys here now.
Okay. Give me 1 second.
No problem. All right. So for attendees of this webinar, we are, of course, offering a 15% discount code when I email you the on-demand version of the webinar. You can expect that in the next day or so. We have our Understanding and Applying CQI-8 live virtual session that runs next on November 24th, 2025. So you can head to our website, and like I said, that code will be included in that email. And then you can visit our website. We've got our blog that we try to update twice weekly or bi-weekly, sorry, not twice weekly. We've also got some tools available there that anybody can use. You can find us on YouTube at Plexus INTL. You'll find the recording of this webinar as well as all of our previous webinars. You can also contact us on LinkedIn at Plexus International.
Sorry about that, Maddie.
No, you're good. Just, all right. So that's a wrap on that. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. And Alan, thank you so much for the presentation today.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Hope you got something out of it. It was interesting for you. Have a good day.
Great. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.